Welcome back to the channel, guys. So myself and Darrell are spending the weekend with Jeanette and Darrell at the Darrell Wells Different Stuff channel. So we're at their cabin, spending a couple of days, spending the weekend, having a laugh, and filming some footage. Right now, Darrell of Darrell Wells Different Stuff, he's working on a review of a new wood stove that he's bought for his channel. Right now he's doing the unboxing and he's going to do a burn-in. That's where myself and Darrell come in. He wants us to do a burn-in with a bow drill fire. So right now, it's been raining here in Newfoundland for the past couple of days. It's been up and down, it's been warm, it's been cold, and obviously the past couple of days, or last night, it started to snow. So everything's a bit wet. But what I'm looking for right now, to start with, is some of this old man's beard. It's up off the ground, wind is blowing through it. I can feel that it's damp, but right now there's not a lot of snow stuck to it, and it's not dripping. So I'm going to start collecting some of this stuff. I'm going to wipe it off in my shirt as best I can and stick it in my pockets, and over the next couple of hours before Darrell is ready, we'll see if we can get this dried out enough to catch a spark off or catch an ember from a bow drill. So let's start gathering some of this. So you can see how this old man's beard just kind of dangles out of the trees and really blows in the wind. And that's the secret, I think, to why it's dry, even though it poured rain last night and it's currently slowing now, just because it's blowing in the wind all the time. And I think I've got myself enough here now for a tinder bundle, but it is damp. I can feel it's damp, and there is a little bit of snow into it. So I'm going to continue to try to dry it off, get it next to my body, warm it up, try to dry it as best I can. And I'm going to collect a couple of bundles like this, just in case the first one turns bad. So the other thing we're looking for with that possum mentality is maybe some of this bark. This bark is full of betula, which is highly flammable. And even though it's got some snow on it, we'll do our best to wipe that off. But this stuff should burn even when it's wet. So we'll collect up some of this as well and put this in our pocket. It doesn't take an ember all that well, but once it's on fire with an open flame, it'll do great to catch everything else on fire. So we'll gather up some of this and put this with our bundle as well. I want to collect up some of these dead plant stalks too. Again, they're up off the ground, they're all vertical. But they're dry. I can hear them snap, and if nothing else, I'll use them to hold my tinder bundle so it don't burn my hands. This is a pretty interesting find. It looks like an old bird's nest. Obviously the term for fire making, the bird's nest, comes from an actual bird's nest, but what I find, at least here with the robins, is that they use too much mud. So all of this is it's pretty wet, but it's all grass and small sticks that you would think would make a nice tinder bundle, but it's glued together with mud. So I find that it doesn't burn very well. In this case, it's not dry. But like I said, it is glued together, packed in there with mud. Doesn't make a good tinder bundle, not like the name suggests. No. So this is a balsam fir tree. This is, here in Newfoundland, what we use is a typical Christmas tree. It's one of my favorite trees in the boreal forest. And you look at these large blisters that you see all over them. These blisters are full of this sap. And this sap doesn't freeze the way that like pine resin does. It stays liquid all year round. And so if you can prick it out with a stick, it gets very sticky when it gets on your fingers. But this stuff is very highly combustible. So I'm going to take a minute, I'm going to gather up some of this stuff and smear it all over this piece of birch, and it makes a beautiful fire starter. Some of the blisters are a little bit drier than others, but you can usually find big ones that pop like that. This stuff is also awesome to have in your first aid kit for burns, blisters, that kind of thing, stings. It's great for that. But in this case, I'm going to use it as a fire starter. So I'm just going to smear up as much of this stuff as I can. Morris Kahansky said it was worth its weight in gold, and I believe him. So we're looking for a bow here now. I'm in this alder grove, and a bow, it doesn't have to be anything special. It just has to be fairly long, like fingertip to armpit. The longer the bow, the more strokes you get, or the longer the stroke, the more revolutions you get out of the spindle. So a short bow means you have to go back and forth more often to try to get the same number of revolutions. I want something strong enough so that it's not going to bend under the pressure caused by the bowstring, but I don't want it so heavy that I get tired using it. So I got this alder branch here now. I like the idea that it has a couple forks here, because I can hook one end of my bowstring on here and I never have to worry about that coming loose. And then there is a bit of a bow to it. It doesn't have to be a big bow. And then down there I see a nice little handle. So I'm going to cut this off, take the branches out, and I might cut this off, and we'll try that. Think that'll work? It'll do. So even though everything is soaking and covered in snow right now, we can still look at the very tops of this grass, and if you're selective, you can pick out some of this is dry. This grass is on the very top here right now. It's been blown by the wind, it's out of the snow. This stuff is bone dry. And I can put it on my cheek and I can tell that's bone dry. This stuff, I got no doubt right now will take an ember. So let's gather up some more of this stuff. Alright, so we got a chunk of dried fir here. Like I said, fir is my favorite. I find that fir is really soft. It makes a really nice ember, and it's also really easy to split compared to spruce. So fir is the better wood to work. So I prefer fir, and it makes a beautiful ember really quickly. So when I'm looking at a chunk like this, I'm looking at it has a beautiful straight grain, and I want to make my hearth board out of this half, and I want my hearth board to be about the start, about wrist to elbow. That's kind of where I want to have my hearth board to come from. So I'm going to get my hearth and my spindle all out of this. The reason I want it to be so long is I want it to be long enough that I can step on it and still have enough room to make a couple of attempts should I need to. Again, I'm going to get my spindle out of this, and I want my spindle to be about the length of my arm. And so when my spindle is in place, I really want it to be about the length of my calf. That's really what I'm going for. Some guys will say they want it to be about pinky to thumb. To me, that's the minimum that I want. And if I'm going to make several attempts at this, then I don't want to start at this length. I want something longer, and so the worst case scenario, I finish at this length. So I like a longer spindle. I find it easier to lean on if it's a little bit longer, rather than trying to be down here like this. I can be here and lean on it. Just makes it a little bit easier. So I'm looking to start my hearth board. I want my hearth board to be, let's say maybe about an inch to start with. So typically something like the size of your thumb, thereabouts. And again, if I find that it's too thick, I can always work it down, shave it down, but I can't add back onto it. So looking at this here now, I got this great big wedge on this side, which is great if I want to go thick, or I got something a little bit thinner on this side if I want to go thin. I want to stay away from the middle of the board. I don't want to hit the center of the tree. I want to stay on the outside. So I'll be looking at one of these two sides is what I'm going to be looking at. The thicker the board, the thicker the hearth board, the more chances that I'm going to have to go through the same hole. But the thicker the hearth board, the thicker the notch, the more dust I need to create to build up the pile to get the ember. So it is always a set of compromises that you have to think about. If I go with the smaller side, I can build up my notch, I can cut my notch and build up my ember really easily, but I might only get one shot at it before I burn all the way through. I may not get a second fire in the same hole. So there's always a series of compromises. I think I'm going to start with this side maybe. It's still a little bit thicker, and I've always got multiple options to go down the board if I need to go more options. So that's my hearth board. So I want to have a long hearth board, long enough that I can step on one side, I put as much body weight as I can onto it, and I still have, so this end is going to be compromised because my dirty boot is now onto it, but I still have all of this space here where I can make notches and make attempts along here, and then if I have to, I can always flip it over. Worst case scenario, if I need more attempts, I can always pick it up, shave off any moisture that I've got, any dirt. I can shave that off with a knife pretty quick and try again. Some people like to cut a chunk from here and leave the full log here as a sacrificial piece to step on. I find it uncomfortable on my foot. I just don't like it. So I like to split out the whole piece and then go from there. So in this case, I'm going to take the spindle out of the exact same chunk. Some people would say that they're better off going with different woods, and they talk about birch on spruce and all kinds of different options, hard woods on soft woods. But in this case, I'm going to go with fir for both pieces. So I'm going to take it at the exact same chunk. And again, I want my spindle to start a little bit bigger than my thumb. So I think this side here is a little bit, I didn't like the way that split, but I'm going to take my spindle out of here. And again, I want to stay away from the center of the board. I'm going to cut my spindle out from right here. And again, I want something bigger than my thumb to start. So again, now I have a spindle that's about the length of my forearm. Nice straight grain. There's no checks. I got one little knot here in the center. I'm not worried about that. But now let's take this, let's start carving this down into something as round. And imagine if this looks like a gigantic pencil. That's what I'm going for. So again, I want something about the size of my thumb. I want it sharp on one end and really blunt like an eraser on the other. The blunt side is going to go down into the wood, and that's where I want all of my friction. The pointy side is going to be up into my bearing block, and I don't want friction at the top. I want all of my friction to be down on the hearth board, generating that heat and burning in my wood. So all I'm doing now is I'm just slowly rotating the stick and going around and around and around, trying to round off that square that I started with, and then flipping end to end. Again, I want something round that's going to rotate in the string nicely. That little knot there is giving me a little bit of problem, but otherwise this fir is carving beautifully. So again, what I'm looking for is something about the size of my thumb. So we're still got a little bit to go, but we're getting pretty close. Remember, this fir is a soft wood, so it's going to burn down pretty quick. So I want to start with something bigger. If this were hardwood, it'd be a different story. And I also want to think about If this doesn't work, if I find this is too big, I can always shave it down after the fact. But if it's too small, I can't put it back on again. So start bigger and work down if you have to. I'm just going to take this end kind of arbitrarily, and I'm going to say that this is my top. Now I'm going to sharpen this out just as if it were a pencil. I'm going to bring it down to a fairly sharp point. I may have to sharpen this 3 or 4 times throughout the operation. This end, I don't want any friction. So let's start with something like that. This end, I'm just going to chamfer off and round out as if it were a dull eraser. And again, I may have to do this 3 or 4 times throughout the process of reshaping, recutting, regrinding. A good sharp Scandi knife is really what you need for this. If your survival knife can't do this, then what's the good of it? So now that I have my spindle made and my board is getting ready, so I'm going to put my foot on this end and I'm going to start drilling on this end. And I want to come in a little bit because I don't want this end to crack off. And I want to put my first notch in here, and I want to roll in about 1.5 times the diameter. So let's just roll her in kind of like that maybe. And somewhere about here is where I want to put my first notch. Kind of like that. So I'm just going to drive the tip of my knife in here and work it around a little bit. And all I really want to do for now is I just want to get myself a small little hole that my spindle is going to dig into, and the bulk of my burning in process is going to be done with the spindle. But I need to start with a small hole that I can catch into. Let's start with that. So this is a 6-foot utility cord. I always carry a couple of these in my pocket. They're great for anything. A piece of string in your pocket is like carrying a Swiss Army knife. You can use them for, in this case, a bowstring. You can use them to tie your pack up. A piece of string is always a great thing to have. I'm right-handed, so I want my string to be on the left side of the bow. So I'm going to go kind of like this, and you can see that in this case I'm a little bit longer than armpit to fingertip. That's fine. I don't need to use the whole thing, but I kind of like, this feels comfortable. That's what's important. So I'm just going to tie this off. It's a little bit loose. This will stretch, but this might take me a couple times to get the exact tension, because remember, my spindle has to go in here and wrap around twice. So I'm going to leave myself a little bit of string. And I'm just going to wrap this around here and tie it off. And again, I may have to change this 5 or 6 times as it loosens up and wears in and stretches. So this is not a permanent solution. This is not a permanent knot. I'm just going to finish off here with a couple half inches. There's a fair bit of slack in here, and the amount of slack is really going to depend on the size of the spindle. So I'm going to take my downward end in my right hand. I go down, and I'm going to come around, and I go around once. Some people go twice. I go once. And now when I put this in my right hand, my spindle is on the outside of the string, pointing down, tip up, and this is then how we start. So now that I've got my notch made, my next step now, I need to start to burn in my notch, burn in my divot hole so that I can start to cut my V-notch. So I'm going to use the same wedge that I cut the splits with. It's already got a nice little divot hole in it. The bearing block is going to be the hardest thing to produce off nature. So if you're carrying something like this, some people will have a bearing block in their knife. I have mine here. I also have a nice moose antler, makes a beautiful bearing block. I also have a beach rock. All make beautiful bearing blocks. So now what I'm looking for is I really want to get my foot over the board. I need my body weight to hold the board down to the ground so it's not vibrating. And then I'm going to use my chest weight to put pressure down on the spindle. So I need my foot really needs to be as close to the hole really as possible. Now I want my wrist locked into my calf because I don't want vibration here. This is bad. So I'm really going to lock that in there, pressure down on my spindle, and I'm just going to slowly Now what I'm looking for now is I want to see, did we burn in the bottom or are we burning in the top? If we're burning the bottom in, I might cut it off and redo it because I don't want this side to get hard and glossy. But I do want this side to get hard. If this gets hard, perfect. So I'm not going to cut this off unless it really starts to deform. I can see smoke, I can see dust. Now's not the time to go at it. So what I have now is really, this is the location of where I want to put my notch. Now, I want to keep my spindle clean and dry. So let's put that in my pocket every time I stop. I want my notch to go almost to the center of my hole and then come on a kind of a 45, kind of like that. And again, it's one of these things that if my notch is narrow, then I can always widen it out. If I start off too wide, I can't make it any smaller. But this notch is what I need to fill with dust. So the bigger it is, the more I have to drill. The smaller it is, the smaller the ember is going to be. So again, it's always about that compromise. But I'm going to take a saw and I'm going to saw in my notch. Looks something, let's start off with something like that. And I find if I'm getting a lot of dust pile up back here, then I can So I'm almost to the center. Let's start with that. Now the other thing that I always do, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to chamfer this side here a little bit. Some people say no, some people say yes. I've always done it. But the point is that it helps to increase airflow to the bottom of the ember. So as I'm drilling, my dust is going to fall down into the hole, and I've got these little chamfers here that's going to help airflow to the bottom of the ember. So you can see now, this is why I've stepped in this far, because I don't want this to crack off. I might be a hair deep. Maybe I should have come out this way just a hair. Let's see if it works. I'm working on a tinder bundle here. I've got a pile of plant stalks, and then in the center of my plant stalks I got a pile of dried grass, and in the center of that I got a pile of dried leaves that the squirrel sorted for me. And then in the center of that I've got this hand selected pile of old man's beard. So this is the driest of the dry that I could find. I've been drying it out now in my pocket. It's been a couple hours since we picked it. I can feel that it's still a little bit damp, but I'm gonna put my ember down here in the middle of this bird's nest without the mud. Put my ember right here, clam it up a little bit, and then we're gonna turn it upside down, and I'm gonna blow this to life. And then all of this, once it's on fire, I'm gonna turn the lot of it slowly upside down, and then by that time then all of this whole thing will be encased in flames, and then I got some more birch bark and we'll shove it all into the stove. That's the plan. So my notch is starting to burn in, or my divot has started to burn in. I've got my notch cut, some grooves on the back, and then down here on the floor I've cleaned it up as best I can, but I'm going to lay down a piece of birch bark, and we'll call this a welcome mat, so that my ember is going to collect on top of that. Once my ember's burning, I can gently take this off, and I have my ember here that I can then transfer into my tinder bundle. If this were a real world situation, obviously I wouldn't have the comfort of a shed, but what I would do was I'd put some priority on the shelter. In this case, shelter before fire, because the shelter would allow me a dry space to work. I wouldn't have the wind, I wouldn't have the snow and the rain. So a shelter to me, in this case, if I was struggling to get a fire, shelter would be the priority. If I had a lighter and I didn't think I'd have a problem, then maybe the fire might be first. But in this case, because of the wind, it's snowing here now, it's windy, I'm going to use the shelter of the shed to do it. But like I said, real world situation, I'd put up a tarp before I'd try to get a fire. Now I'm going to bring in my foot, and again, I want a fair bit of weight on this log because I don't want the log rocking under the bowing action. I don't want it to tip in any directions. I want it to be solid. If you get vibrations here, that's then when you your ember starts to shake out of the hole, and that's bad. I want my foot fairly close. Now I can lock my wrist into my calf. And this is why I want my spindle as long as I do. If the spindle were shorter, then my hand would start to be down here and my arm is not long enough. So I like my spindle to be kind of like that, and it's going to get shorter as we go. So I don't want to start any shorter. So now I'm going to start off fairly slow. So what I need to do right now is just build up dust. I can't start an ember if I don't have dust. So at this point, it's just slow and steady. I'm putting dust down that hole, down that notch. Using the full length of the bow. I want to see if I'm getting dust on the top of the hearth board, because that's bad, that's wasting. So it's not bad to stop and have a look. I'm getting a little bit of dust on the top of my hearth board. I'm starting to shoulder out a little bit. I think my notch is about full. I'm going to pick up the speed, pick up the pressure, And I'm going to count to 40. If my bow starts slipping, I'm going to tighten the string with my thumb. Now, no rush, don't panic. I'm going to slowly lift my foot. Keep my spindle dry. I got some dust on the top, I want to save that. Get that back in the pile. We have an ember. I want to keep all of this dry. Let that cook for a second. No rush. I want that to congeal. We definitely got a good ember. She's got a bit of a cherry on top. We'll drop it. Get all the dust. Let that congeal again. Now the wind is in my favor a little bit now. And that's how you light a wood stove. Well, we got the fire going just in time. It looks like a snow squall has started to come in, and it's pretty blustery here now. Darrell wanted to do an initial burn off on the wood stove. We got that done. Kettle's just about boiled here now. We're going to get some bologna and some sausages out here on the fire in a few minutes and have a bit of a cook-up. So you saw how long it took us to get a bow drill fire going. There's a lot of work to it. It's not the kind of thing that you want to do in an emergency situation. In an emergency situation, you really need to have an instant fire going. So you want to carry something like Surefire, Mini Inferno, those little pads with some cotton and a lighter. Anytime I'm going in the woods, I've got a lighter in my pocket. I've got a lighter in my haversack. Darrell has got a couple lighters. There's one in my rucksack. So if we lose a lighter, if one goes out, we still have 3 or 4 backups. The last thing you want to do in an emergency situation is have to revert to primitive fire. But even if you do have a lighter in your fire or a lighter in your pocket, that's still not going to guarantee you fire. You still have to know how to make shavings or kindling, or know where to collect dry wood. So these are skills that you need to practice and own and try all the time. Big shout out to Jeanette and Darrell Wells. Darrell Wells Different Stuff for hosting us for the weekend. We're having some great fun here all weekend, shooting some footage, having a few drinks, having a laugh. So big shout out to them. I'll leave a link to their channel in the comments below, so go check them out. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, and comment to Smooth and Outdoors, and stay tuned. You'll never know what we got coming up next. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Bye.
I'm working on a tinder bundle.
Wait.
I'm working on a tinder bundle here. I've got a pile of plants.
Still rolling?